national councils of national minorities affect identification processes and how they challenge political participation of minorities in Serbia. So, but first I would like to explain why I think that it's important to look on these issues through the lenses of identity. Identity has become central concept in social sciences in recent decades, and also it has become a key political issue in many contemporary societies. If we look on the challenges stemming from migration, globalization, and highly interconnected world, then we can see that identities, that all these processes underline importance of identities not only for individuals but also for social and political life. And recent migration in Europe has brought discussions about these identities again to the center, especially those national identities of Europeans in opposition to ethnic identities of the migrants. So identities matter. But why I insist that they are so important? Because on one hand they define who we are. They also give us help us to understand the world around us, to understand other people's behavior. They provide us with the meanings. And also, identity as a concept is used in social sciences to explain like social movements, political mobilization, and democratic legitimacy. So identities really matter, and we should focus on them. So, in my presentation, I will first very briefly offer you the main concept of identity in the literature. Then I will just mention what, based on what kind of theory and methodology my work is based on, and then I will speak on these implications of national councils for collective identities of minorities in Serbia. And I will conclude my presentation with the conclusion. But before that, just I would like to say why I applied for this conference. Few years ago, I was already in the last years, I was doing research on the collective identifications of the Slovak national minority living in Serbia. And also here I was analyzing the concept of identity from conceptual level, but also how these identities are performed on the ground. And also I was looking how this concept is constructed on the state level in Slovakia and Serbia. That is one thing, and the other thing is that it was also said, Charles Taylor said it, that identity means who we are and from where do we come from. And I'm coming from Vojvodina, and this is one way of me to figure it out, who I am. So in social science, scientists have agreed on that, what identity is, rather than how it is manifested. And they agreed that identity is not a thing or some property that someone has, but rather that is a process of identification. It's something that someone does and is a result of social relations. And it has become a general rule to speak about identities more in the terms of construction than in terms of inheritance and blood. And for example, in political science, but mainly in all social sciences, we consider identities to be categories of membership. That membership can be based on all kinds of different types, such as ethnicity, class, gender, personality, and so on. And in sociological literature, identity theory has proposed that individuals can exist only in the social structure, and that individuals' identity can derive then from the roles that we hold in society, the groups that we belong to, and from our personal characteristics. Rogers, Brubaker, and Cooper and others have condemned this concept because of its overusage, and that has brought to its meaningless. But as I was mentioning, other scholars, and me included, find this concept very useful analytically. And now I would just want to say briefly how ethnic identity is defined, because everything what I will be speaking about later, it is related to ethnicity and ethnic identity of minorities. So there are different definitions of ethnicity and ethnic identity, and most of them emphasize this in some way. But Kanchan Chandra has proposed a new definition of ethnic identity, which you can read there, and she has also proposed to exclude all the other previously used definitional attributes such as common language, common culture, homeland, common history, and so on. And she said that ethnic identity presents a subset of identity categories in which membership is determined by the attributes associated with descent or believed to be associated with descent. And in the conversation on ethnic identity, constructivism has become a dominant position too. My work that I was doing on collective identities of the Slovak living in Serbia is building on identity theory, what I was mentioning before, and Kanchan Chandra's definition. Here it is important that identity theory suggests that people can have multiple identifications because of their multiple positions in society, and what is here important is that they claim that all these different identities are hierarchically constructed, meaning that there is a higher identity that coordinates the verification process of the lower identities. The main findings were that the members of the Slovak national minority in Serbia identify themselves in multiple ways. They perform different national, ethnic, religious, subnational, regional identities, and that all these identities coexist in a non-conflictual way, but they vary in the salience for respondents. So, identities are important for the establishment, protection, and also implementation of the minority rights. But the argument goes both ways, also constitutional and institutional design. And the institution affect identity processes. And here I want to show on this National Council how that actually works in practice. So national councils are self-governing organs in the fields of culture, education, official use of language and script, and they represent minorities as collectivities. So but for their establishment, it's important the census data on ethnicity. So establishment and size of the council, which can be from 15 to 35, directly depends on the people's declaration of ethnicity in the census. Secondly, voting rights of minority also depends on this census, meaning that the members of national minorities in Serbia, in order to exercise their voting rights, such as run for office or candidate, or vote in the elections for national minority councils, have to register in so-called special voting lists. And here they have to declare their identities. For example, in the public census, you can self-declare yourself, how you identify. And the census from 2011 allows double declaration, and it is anonymous. The special voting lists, they investigate your membership to the national minority. They ask too many information. You have to name, birth date, permanent, temporary address, and that if you belong to some minority. But what is the difference between two? While in the first one, the data collection on ethnicity is anonymous, in the second, you are obliged by law to declare your ethnic belonging. If you don't declare, you cannot exercise your voting rights. And the biggest difference is that in the first one, in public census, enumerator has to write down your ethnicity exactly as stated. But in another one, authorities have a right to inspect your identity. It is not known exactly how they do that. They can refuse to sign you into. And I can speak about this later if you will have questions. Just to put in context everything what I said. We have different definitions. definitions, conceptualizations, and interpretations of the term identity and the concept of ethnic identity in academic and ordinary usage, then on international level and national levels, and also on the different like micro level of state, meso level of communities, and micro level of individuals. But it seems that all these interpretations somehow function in isolation and they don't inform themselves. And from that we can have serious problems in a practice. So I said that collective identities are important for establishment and protection of minority rights, but also the minority institutions have a significant impact of these rights, especially voting rights, through the collecting those data on ethnicity. And just to conclude, so we have public census, voting registers, and legal norms in Serbia use categories with different definitional attributes. That means that we can, and the second problem, we can never know exact numbers of some minorities in a practice. And from that, all these shortcomings, there is question, can this data actually serve as an adequate measurement for establishment of minority rights? Thank you.
We feel like Serbia is acting discriminatory towards certain minorities. For example, Bosnian Serbs can apply for citizenship of Serbia, whereas Bosniaks and Croats from the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina cannot. They cannot even come to Serbian universities because unless they verify their diploma. There are a lot of different rules towards Bosnian Serbs and Bosniaks and Croats. And as far as I have read, all of the three should be a minority in Serbia. As far as I have read, all of the three constituent people of Bosnia and Herzegovina should be, in a sense, a minority in Serbia.
Well, based on everything what I was saying, is that I don't think that, first of all, it's the right practice for determining minorities, how it is done in Serbia, the census data and everything. Yeah, because it's asked about something else. It's not really the same ethnicity there, and then all the discretion of determining if someone is national minority or not is in the hands of the state. So it doesn't matter how you declare and everything in census. So state actually decides who is national minority or not. How is this decided? For all these years I could have not been able to find out. I was writing to them to give me the criteria based on what they decide. That is in direct opposition that we have definition, legal definition of national minority in the law. But if it's decide, how they decide actually in practice, we don't know. So based on this, someone could argue that yes, it can be discriminatory. Yeah, and there is a high probability because it's not even transparent and how they decide. And this is what you ask. I don't know this case, but I believe you what you are saying. Yes, if you are asking that that they are privileged, Bosnian Serbs.
Yeah, it's a matter of dual citizenship. Bosnian Serbs get the citizenship.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Whereas other citizens of Bosnia don't.
They allow me to apply for a dual citizenship, whereas some people from my family that live in the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina do not have the right to apply for citizenship.
Yeah, based on ethnicity, if I may ask, based on ethnicity?
No, it's just based on the part of the Bosnia and Herzegovina we come from. It's not even based on ethnicity.
Based on residency status. If no further questions, thank you very much.